Bisola was not an ordinary child. At just 6 years old, she was already brighter than most children twice her age. She loved school so much that even when other children played in the sand, Bisola would sit under a tree, holding her small slate, practicing her sums. Her laughter was pure, her smile was warm, and her heart was kind. If there was one child the whole village loved, it was Bisola. Every morning, Bisola woke up before the cock crowed. She would rush to the little school in the center of the village, her bare feet tapping the dusty road, her eyes shining with excitement. The villagers often teased her. Bisola, slow down, school will not run away. But she never listened. To her, the classroom was a second home, and her teacher was like a second mother. Her teacher often said, Bisola, you are a star, and one day your light will shine far beyond this village. Those words made Bisola proud, and she worked harder every day. She helped her classmates with their work, shared her pencils, and never laughed at anyone who made a mistake. Instead, she clapped for them, saying, "Try again, you can do it." But one morning, something happened that shook the entire village. A notice was pinned to the door of the school. The words were written in bold letters. School closed until further notice. The teacher stood in silence. The parents murmured in confusion, and the children, one by one, began to cry. But Bisola did not cry. She stood staring at the words, reading them over and over, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would change. When her friends asked, "Bisola, what does it mean?" her small lips trembled as she whispered, "It means no school." That evening, Bisola did not laugh. She did not play. She sat by the fire in front of her mother's hut, holding her slate tightly to her chest. Her eyes were wet, but she refused to let the tears fall. "Mama," she finally said in a shaky voice, "how will I learn now? How will I become the doctor I always wanted to be if there is no school?" Mrs. Lami's heart broke at those words. She hugged her tightly, but even in her arms, Bisola shook her head. "Mama, please, don't let my dream die." From that day, the village became quiet. The once lively mornings filled with children's laughter on the way to school turned into silence. Parents complained, but the government refused to help. The school, the only one in the whole village, was left to rot. But Bisola's sadness was different. She no longer sang her favorite songs. She no longer laughed at the goats chasing each other in the compound. She no longer raced her friends in the evenings. The star of the village was slowly dimming. Her parents could not take it anymore. Night after night, they watched their little girl sit in silence, clutching her books. Finally, Mr. Tunde said, "If our village has no place for her dreams, then we must send her to the city. There, she will go to school again, and her dreams will live again." Her mother hesitated. The city was far, noisy, and dangerous. But then, she looked at Bisola's thin face, her dull eyes, and her drooping shoulders. She knew they had no choice. The news was broken to Bisola one cool morning. "My daughter," her father said gently, "we are sending you to live with your Auntie Tolu in the city. You will go to school there, and your dreams will live again." At first, Bisola could not believe her ears. "The city?" she gasped. Her heart raced with happiness and excitement. She had only heard stories about the city, bright lights, big schools, and children in neat uniforms. Slowly, a smile returned to her face. "I will really go, Papa?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Yes, my star," her father replied, brushing away her tears. "You will go and you will shine." The villagers gathered to bid her farewell. Some gave her biscuits, others pressed coins into her tiny hands. They said, "Don't forget us when you become great." Bisola waved from the bus window, her small heart beating fast with hope and fear. As the bus roared away, dust rising into the air, no one knew that this journey, the one meant to save her dream, was also the beginning of a nightmare that would change her life forever. Bisola's eyes widened the moment she stepped into the city. Tall buildings rose high into the sky. Cars honked endlessly, and people hurried in every direction like they were all chasing time. It was nothing like the quiet village she had left behind. For a while, she forgot her sadness and pressed her little face to the bus window, whispering, "So, this is the city." Her aunts welcomed her with a warm hug. "Bisola, you will be fine here," she said, smiling. Her aunt's house was not big, but it was neat and filled with the smell of stew. For the first time in months, Bisola felt hope. She would go back to school, she would study hard, and one day she would make her parents proud. And indeed, school in the city was everything she had dreamed of. Her uniform was neat and blue, her teachers were kind, and the classrooms had real desks and blackboards that shone. Bisola quickly became one of the best students in her class. Teachers often called her the little professor. She answered questions, she solved problems, and she helped her classmates just like she did back in the village. Her parents were overjoyed whenever they spoke to her on the phone. "My daughter, keep shining," her father would say. Bisola always replied with excitement, "Papa, I will never disappoint you." For a while, it seemed like life was perfect. But behind the smiles, behind the neat house, something dark was waiting. When Bisola turned 10, things began to change. It started with her aunt's husband. At first, he would call her into the sitting room when no one was around. "Come and help me with the remote," he would say. Or, "Massage my legs, little girl." Bisola thought nothing of it until his hands began to linger where they should not. Confused and frightened, she tried to pull away. "Uncle, stop," she whispered once, her small voice trembling. But instead of stopping, he warned her in a deep, angry voice. "If you ever tell anyone, you will be sent back to the village and you will never go to school again." Bisola froze. Her dream of education was all she had. She carried the secret in her heart, too scared to speak. But the nightmare didn't end there. Soon her aunt's teenage son also began to torment her. He would sneak into her room at night, whispering threats that made her shiver under her thin blanket. "Don't tell Mama or you will regret it." The once bright and cheerful Bisola started to change. She no longer laughed loudly in class. She no longer played with her friends after school. Instead, she walked home slowly, her heart heavy with fear. Her teachers noticed her silence, but when they asked, she forced a smile and said, "I'm just tired." One night, she finally gathered courage. Her eyes filled with tears as she approached her aunt in the kitchen. "Auntie, please, I need to tell you something," she whispered. Her aunt, busily stirring a pot of soup, looked at her with impatience. "What is it, Bisola? Speak quickly." With shaking lips, Bisola poured out her pain. She told her aunt about her husband, about her son, about the things they did when no one was watching. For a moment, silence filled the kitchen. Bisola thought at last she would be free. But then her aunt's face hardened. "Liar!" she shouted. "How dare you say such things about my family? You want to scatter my home? You want to ruin my marriage? Is that what your parents sent you here for?" Bisola's heart shattered. "Auntie, I'm not lying," she cried, tears running down her cheeks. "Enough," her aunt snapped, slapping the table. "If you ever repeat this nonsense again, I will send you back to the village and you will never step into a classroom again." That night, Bisola lay awake, her pillow wet with tears. The very person she trusted had turned against her. Her voice had been silenced. From that day, she stopped trying to speak. Slowly, she withdrew from the world. In school, she smiled less. At home, she avoided everyone. In her notebooks, she no longer drew stars or wrote happy letters to her parents. Instead, she scribbled words that no one ever saw. Who will believe me? Who will save me? Her childhood, once filled with laughter and dreams, had turned into a prison of fear. But she kept everything inside, carrying her pain like a heavy stone on her tiny chest. And yet, unknown to her, tragedy was already waiting just ahead. a tragedy so deep that it would break the silence forever. By the time Bisola turned 13, she was no longer the bright, cheerful girl everyone admired. The star of the village had become a shadow in the city. Her laughter was gone, her smile was weak, and her once sparkling eyes had grown dim. She carried her pain silently, hiding it from her teachers, her classmates, and even her parents. Whenever her mother called from the village, Bisola forced her voice to sound cheerful. "I am fine, Mama," she would say, even though tears often rolled down her face as soon as the call ended. She wanted to tell them the truth, but she remembered her aunt's warning. "If you speak, you will never go to school again." So Bisola carried the secret alone. But sometimes, the body speaks what the mouth cannot. It began with small stomach pains. Then came headaches that made her cry silently in the night. Soon her clothes began to feel loose because she was no longer eating well. Her aunt only scolded her. "You are too lazy," she would say. "Finish your food. Don't waste it." But the truth was that she had lost her appetite for life itself. One morning, Bisola woke up and noticed her clothes were wet. She frowned and thought she had spilled water on herself. But the next day, it happened again. And the next, a strange, strong smell began to follow her. She washed her clothes secretly, scrubbing them hard, but the wetness and smell did not stop. In school, her classmates began to notice. They whispered behind her back. Some laughed, others moved away from her desk. Bisola felt shame burning inside her. She stopped raising her hand in class. She stopped sitting near anyone. She sat quietly in a corner praying for the day to end quickly. She did not know the name of her sickness. She only knew that her body was betraying her. She wanted to run to her aunt and beg for help, but she remembered the slap on the table, the harsh words, and the threats. "Liar, you will ruin my home." So Bisola stayed silent, even though her world crumbled. But one day her aunt noticed. The smell in the house was too strong to ignore. She followed Bisola to her room and saw the wet, stained bedsheet. "What is this nonsense?" she shouted angrily. Bisola trembled and cried, "Auntie, I don't know. I cannot control it." Her aunt's face twisted with disgust. She did not hug her, did not comfort her. Instead, she picked up the phone and called Bisola's parents. "Come and carry your daughter," she snapped coldly. "I cannot live with this disgrace any longer." When her parents arrived, they were shocked. Their once beautiful, healthy child was now thin, weak, and smelling of sickness. Tears filled their eyes as they embraced her. "Why didn't you tell us, my child?" her mother wept. But Bisola only cried harder. "Mama, I tried, but nobody believed me." They rushed her to the hospital. After several tests, the doctor's face grew serious. He explained that Bisola had developed a terrible infection called vesicovaginal fistula, VVF, a condition that made her urinate on herself without control. The doctor explained that such infections often come from abuse, from wounds hidden in silence. Her parents were speechless. The truth was too heavy. They turned to look at Bisola, their tears flowing freely. "My daughter," his father whispered, "why did you suffer alone?" Bisola weakly held her mother's hand. "I tried to tell Auntie, but she said I was lying. I just wanted to go to school." Those words pierced everyone's heart like a sharp knife. The little girl who only wanted education, who carried her dream with so much hope, was now broken by the very people who were supposed to protect her. The doctors did all they could. They gave her medicines, they prayed, they placed her under care. But Bisola's small body was already too weak, her spirit too wounded. For 2 days, her parents sat by her bedside, holding her hands, whispering prayers, begging her not to leave them. On the second night, just as the clock struck midnight, Bisola opened her eyes for the last time. She looked at her parents, managed a small smile, and whispered with trembling lips, "Don't cry. Tell the children to always speak." And then, like a candle flame, her breath faded into silence. Her mother screamed. Her father fell to his knees. Nurses rushed in, but it was too late. Mrs. Lamy screamed, "Hey, Tolu, you have killed me. Ah, Egbamio." Mr. Tunde just knelt staring at the wife.
The brightest star of the village had gone out. But the story did not end there. No, her death was only the beginning of a storm that will shake the city and the village alike. For her parents, grief turned into fire. They would not let their daughter's suffering be buried quietly. They would fight for her. They would demand justice.
And justice, though slow, was already on its way. The death of Bisola shook the entire village and the city alike. News spread quickly how the little girl who once dreamed of becoming a doctor had died so young, carrying a pain too heavy for her tiny shoulders. People wept openly. Mothers clutched their daughters tighter. Fathers bowed their heads in silence. Nobody could understand why such evil had been allowed to happen. But Bisola's parents refused to let her story end with tears. On the day of her burial, her mother stood by the grave, her face swollen with grief. She lifted her hands to the sky and cried, "God, if I cannot have my child back, then give me justice. Do not let her death be in vain." Her father, his voice trembling, added, "We will not rest until the world knows what happened." The next day, they went straight to the police. At first, the officers listened without much care. But when Bisola's father slammed her hospital report on the table, the proof of abuse and infection, their faces hardened. The case was opened immediately. The investigation began, and soon the truth poured out like a flood. Neighbors confessed that they had noticed Bisola's sadness, but had kept quiet. Teachers admitted they had seen the change in her, but thought it was just city stress. The hospital records confirmed everything. Bisola had been abused over and over again. Her aunt's husband was the first to be arrested. He tried to deny it, but witnesses stepped forward. The teenage son was next, trembling as the police handcuffed him. Finally, her aunt herself was taken away for refusing to protect the child and for silencing her cries. She screamed, she begged, she claimed she knew nothing. But the evidence was too strong. The trial began, and the courtroom was filled with people. Some came from the city. Many traveled from the village. Everyone wanted to hear how justice would be served for little Bisola. Her parents sat in the front row, holding hands, tears streaming down their faces as lawyers described their daughter's suffering. When the judge asked if anyone had any last words for Bisola, her father stood, his voice shaking but strong. He said, "My daughter was a light. She only wanted to learn. She trusted those who were supposed to protect her, but they betrayed her. If this court does not give her justice, then what hope is left for the children of this land?" The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of weeping. Even the judge wiped his eyes before speaking. His voice was firm, carrying the weight of the law. For the crime of child abuse, for the crime of neglect, and for the crime of silence, this court finds the accused guilty. They are hereby sentenced to long years in prison. The words echoed in the room. Bisola's parents cried, but this time their tears were mixed with relief. Justice had been served. The people who had destroyed their child's life would never be free again. But justice was not enough. Something more had to be done. The parents decided that their daughter's name must never be forgotten. They began to speak in schools,
churches and gatherings, telling children, always speak, do not be silent. Your voice is your identity. Their story caught attention. Newspapers wrote about Bisola, radio stations spoke about her. Slowly, donations began to pour in from kind strangers who wanted to honor her memory. And then, one bright morning, a dream was born. A new school would be built in the village. The ground was cleared, the bricks were laid, and the walls rose high. At the entrance, a signboard was placed, bold and proud. Bisola's light, where every child's voice is heard. On the day of the opening, children from every corner of the village came, wearing neat uniforms and carrying their books. Parents smiled, proud that their children would now have a chance to learn. And as the ribbon was cut, Bisola's mother whispered, "My child, your dream lives on." The classrooms were filled with joy again. Teachers told her story to every new pupil, reminding them, never keep silent. Speak even if your voice shakes. Speak because your voice can save your life. Bisola was gone, but her light was still shining. Years passed, but the memory of Bisola never faded. In every corner of the village, her name was spoken with both sorrow and pride. Mothers told their children about the little girl who loved books more than food, who dreamed of becoming a nurse, and who paid the highest price because her cries were silenced. The Bisola Memorial School quickly became more than just a school. It was a symbol. Its walls carried a story that no child could ignore. Every morning before lessons began, the head teacher would gather the pupils and say, "Remember Bisola? She was once like you, full of dreams, full of laughter. But when she tried to speak, no one listened. Do not let that happen to you. Speak boldly. Your voice is your strength." The children would nod, their young faces serious. Some of them would even whisper to each other, "We must always speak," because Bisola could not. Slowly, courage began to grow in their hearts. But the story did not end with the school. A writer from the city, deeply moved by her tragedy, decided to put her story into a book. Page by page, he wrote about her brilliance, her struggles, her silence, and her painful death. The book was titled The Voice of a Little Star. When the book was launched, the hall was filled with people, teachers, parents, children, even government officials. Bisola's parents, front row, their faces wet with tears as the writer read aloud from the final page. Her body may have been silenced, but her voice will forever teach children that silence is not safety. To speak is to live. The book spread quickly. It was read in schools across villages and cities. Teachers used it as a guide to teach children about courage and truth. Parents read it to their families, warning them never to ignore the voice of a child. Bisola's story became a shield for others. One day, a young girl in a nearby town stood up in class after hearing the story and confessed that someone was trying to harm her at home. Because she spoke out, she was saved before it was too late. When her mother hugged her tightly, the girl whispered, "I remembered Bisola. I didn't want to be silent like her." Stories like this continued to spread. Bisola, though gone, had become a savior to many children she had never met. Her pain had birthed a new courage in others. Her parents, though still grieving, found comfort in this legacy. "Our daughter's life was short," her father often said, "but her impact is eternal." Her mother added softly, "Whenever a child speaks up and is saved, I hear Bisola's voice echoing." The village itself changed. Parents listened more carefully to their children. Teachers paid closer attention to signs of sadness in their pupils. Even leaders began to speak more seriously about protecting children. The silence that once killed a little girl was slowly being broken. At the entrance of Bisola Memorial School, another sign was placed years later. It read, "To every child who walks through these doors, your voice is your identity. Use it." Every child who read those words carried them like a shield, a reminder that their lives mattered, their words mattered, and their dreams deserved protection. And so, though Bisola's life ended at just 13, her story lived on, stronger than ever. She had become more than just a child from a small village. She had become a voice for children everywhere, a lesson for parents and teachers, and a warning to those who thought silence could hide evil. In the end, Bisola was not forgotten. No, she was remembered as the girl whose star never went out because her light was passed into the hearts of countless others. Her voice had not died. It had only grown louder. Bisola may be gone, but her story lives on, and you can help her voice reach millions more. If her story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video. Let the world hear her voice and make sure no child suffers in silence again. And if you believe in protecting children's dreams, hit that subscribe button. Join us in telling stories that matter.